Vamp, Chapter 8. It was a very windy day. Just last week we had been enjoying clear blue skies and starry nights, but yesterday the black clouds rolled in and the rain began to pour. It made working in these conditions exhausting for the boys. They were having a hard time standing in one spot. Matt and John had tied themselves off to the rails so that they could work the controls better. They were using the crane to take down the pots, and I was loading them with the bait and launching them over the side of the ship. The wind was presenting a problem because every time the crane was attached to a pot, it would pick it up, it would swing it around in the air for a few seconds before we could get it down to the deck. "Let's drop 2 more overboard and call it a day," said Aiden's voice from the loudspeaker. "About time," said Ethan under his breath. Just 2 more pots and we could go inside, I thought. Although I can live in any temperature, I hate the cold. It's slightly ironic because my body temperature is basically that of Antarctica, but being in cold weather can make me stiff. The next pot came down surprisingly without a problem. However, as soon as it hit the deck, the wind picked up immensely, and some more dark clouds started rolling in. "We better hurry this up," shouted Matt from the controls. I looked over and saw the stress in Matt's face. He was worried and hurrying. In my 98 years alive, I've learned you should never hurry a dangerous job. I looked up and saw that the last pot was being lowered. It was swinging 10 feet in every direction. There was no way we could get this down without damaging something. The pot hit the wall, then the rail, and then slammed onto the deck. James unhooked the crane from the pot, and I walked over and placed the bait inside and sent it overboard. "Hit the deck!" screamed Aiden from the post. I turned around to see the ball and chain swinging around wildly in the wind. I saw it heading straight for Roy. I decided quickly that I didn't have a choice. I tried to make my speed look as humanly as possible, but I might have pushed it. I got over to Roy just in time to push him out of the way. We landed on the deck of the ship and held still as we watched the ball whip past us and crash into the side of the boat. It was the loudest crack I'd ever heard in my life. "Too close for comfort, guys," John yelled. "You're sure a quick little thing. You all right?" Roy asked as we both stood on our feet. "I'm just fine. Are you okay?" Roy nodded, and we turned our attention back to the 5 concerned faces watching us. I tried to smile, but I realized that this was very serious. "Let's just get this last one in and go rest," Roy said to the group. We managed to get the last pot into the water without any struggles. We picked up the deck and made our way into the galley, where we stripped down to our long johns, and the men sat around the table with cups of hot coffee Aiden had started up that morning. I walked over to the kitchen and started to prepare a hearty meal for everyone so they could all go to sleep on full stomachs. We could hear the engines quiet down, followed by the sound of Aiden's boots coming down the stairs to join us. We would have at minimum 16 hours to relax and sleep before we would have to pull the pots from the water. They were tired and hungry. There wasn't one plate with leftovers remaining on the table. One by one, they made their way to their beds, and within an hour the boat was silent. I was cleaning up the last of the dishes when Aiden brought over his dishes from the table. "You should go and get some rest. I can finish this up," he said, standing behind me and setting the plate into the sink. "I'm really not that tired." "Bull. I'm exhausted, and I wasn't out there doing physical labor. Let's go cuddle," he said, grabbing my hand. "What about the ship?" "It's anchored." I didn't protest. I knew he needed to sleep. I could always pretend. We climbed under the covers in his room, and I laid on my back, staring up at the beadboard ceiling above us, listening to the waves crashing against the sides of the boat. It had started raining, and I could hear the drops hit the window. I knew I would never be able to fall asleep, but this was definitely close enough. Aiden was laying on his side with one arm over me. His thumb was lightly rubbing my side. I turned my face towards him and snuggled into the nook under his chin. I could hear his breathing slow and his heart go into resting mode when he finally did fall asleep. We lay there for the next 11 hours. Everyone else was fast asleep. Someone was reading for a little bit as I could hear book pages turning. Every now and then there would be some footsteps in the hall from someone making their way to the lavatory. I closed my eyes for a while, and even though I wasn't asleep, I was more relaxed now than I had ever been in my life. About 16 hours later, we all congregated in the galley where Roy had prepared another delicious feast for us. The weather hadn't changed much since the crane incident, so after we ate, we threw on extra warm clothes and went back to the deck to prepare to bring the pots up from the ocean floor. Aiden was maneuvering the boat back into place so we could start catching the strings and pulling the pots up. The wind was getting really bad, and the waves were growing by the minute. One wave in particular crashed over the side of the boat, spraying myself and Roy. Water was pouring down from the deck above, and I looked up to see James standing at the top of the stack of pots we had just brought up. "You need to get off that pot," I screamed at him. "Just give me a minute, it's almost fixed," James shouted back. Just as he finished his sentence, a 20-foot wave crashed over the port side of the boat. I hung onto a bar I found, but I couldn't see anything with the water rushing down everywhere. Then, just as quickly as it arrived, it was over. Then shouting began. "Man overboard!" screamed Aiden from his post as the alarm was going off. "James fell over," shouted Roy. They were all trying to get their survival suits on as quickly as possible. I saw the waves splash over James in the water, one after another, after another, after another. "There's no time," I said quietly to myself. Nothing they could do could save him. Only I could. Without another moment of thought, I jumped up onto the edge of the boat and locked my sights on James's orange slicker that was getting pummeled by the waves. He looked so small out there. I dove. I hit the water like a rock, and within a second I was at James' side. I could see the confusion and bewilderment on his face as I popped up from below the water in front of him. "Wrap your arms around me." "What?" he said as he struggled to stay above the water. "I'm going to save your life. Now hang on to me." "Okay, Gretch. You know you're going to have some explaining to do," he replied in between coughs. My look said what I wanted it to say, and he wrapped his arms around my neck. "Take a deep breath. This will only take a couple seconds." He gulped as much air as he could and plugged his nose. I dove under the waves and sped towards the boat. Once I came to the hull, I used my fingernails to grip into the metal and climb the sides of the ship with my bare hands. They were all waiting on the deck for us. I've never seen humans move so fast, and before I knew it, we were all downstairs in the galley. "Get those towels and blankets over here," screamed Aiden. Roy was helping James, who kept staring at me with wide eyes, and it was clear Aiden was not going to leave my side anytime soon. "You have to take your wet clothes off, Gretch. You need to do it now before you get hypothermia, please," Aiden said as he started to remove my rain slicker. He was begging me to comply. I knew I would never be able to talk my way out of this one. He'd be checking my temperature and pulse every 5 minutes if I pretended to be human, and he'd know something was wrong. I just stood there looking at him, speechless. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do next. "Gretchen, we need to get your wet clothes off and wrap you up in some blankets now," he said as he was unzipping my sweatshirt and trying to pull it off my arms. "It won't help," I whispered quietly. "What? Come on, Gretch, work with me here," he said as he finally got my sweatshirt off my arms and threw it on the floor next to us. I pushed him back. "It won't help," I said in a low and aggravated tone. They all stopped and stared at me. "Baby, come on. What do you mean it won't help? You're freezing. We need to get your blood flowing." I stared down at my feet for a moment and then looked up, all the eyes staring back at me. "I'm already dead, Aiden." I don't understand. I don't have a pulse in my body. I don't sleep or breathe. My skin feels like ice, and it's as hard as stone. I have nails that can literally dig into metal, teeth that rip flesh off of a bone. I have speed and strength, and I can live through almost anything. I paused and looked at all of them. They looked about as white as me, like they had seen a ghost, and they were all holding their breath. I continued more calmly. "The biggest myths you have ever heard about are about to become a reality." I looked down at my feet. I wanted to run. I imagined myself running up the stairs, jumping overboard, swimming to shore, and starting over somewhere new once again. I had made a huge mistake. But instead, I looked up at the men standing in front of me. Men who used logic instead of daydreams. Men who hadn't heard a fairy tale since they were kids. Men who would surely not believe what I was about to say. For the first time in many years, I felt fear. fear of not knowing how they would react. However, the time was here, and in less than a second I uttered the secret I had been hiding from humans for almost a century. I'm a vampire.